This is Geometry, Unit 7, the Quiz 1 review. This is worksheet number 2. We're going to draw a right triangle. With sides M and N and hypotenuse of K, where the hypotenuse is always across from the 90 degree, so that would be K. Your two other sides would be called legs of a right triangle. To write a formula that represents the relationship between these, we know that the hypotenuse squared has to equal the sum of the legs, the square, to square the sides and add them together. We're going to solve for x. We recognize this is a right triangle. It does not, there's no hint here that this is a 30, 60, 90. In fact, from the short leg to the long leg, it doesn't show that property. So the best I can do is say that the hypotenuse squared equals leg squared plus leg squared. Across from the 90 is your hypotenuse. The other two are your legs. So we're going to say that x squared equals 9 squared plus 12 squared. 81 plus 144. 225. And when you take the square root of 225, we get 15. So that's what x would equal. In our situation here, the short leg times 2 is not what the hypotenuse is, so we know this is not a 30, 60, 90. Don't just assume it and do the rules for 30, 60, 90. So we have to use the Pythagorean theorem. Across from the 90 is your hypotenuse. The other two sides that make up the box are the legs. So 34 squared is going to equal 16 squared plus x squared. X is one of the legs in this case, so that stays on the other side of the equal sign than the hypotenuse. 16 squared is 256. Subtract that across. And we get 30. So that's the leg of the right triangle. Across from the 90 is the hypotenuse. The other two sides are called the legs of the right triangle. When you square 50, subtract the 100. When we take the square root, that's what x would be, but 2400 is going to clearly break down to be 24 times 100. That might be one way to do it. You know that the square root of 100 is 10. 24 can be broken down into 4 times 6. So now you're going to pull out that 2. So now we have 20 root 6. we're going to find the area of an isosceles triangle. We have side lengths of 17 and a base of 18. So if the two sides are the same are 17 and the base is 18, to figure out what the area of a triangle is, we need to know what the height of the triangle is. So I'm just going to use the one side of this triangle. When we look at this triangle, if all the sides were exactly the same, then I know it would be a 60, 60, 60. But all the sides are not the same. So the best that I can do is to know that across from the 90 is the 17. Because this point is equal distance to the end point, I know that it bisects this opposite side, so this is 9. And we can calculate the hypotenuse squared equals leg squared plus the other leg, we'll call it h for the height. So 17 squared is 289. When we subtract 81, we get 208. We'll take the square root of 208. 208 can be broken down into 16 times 13. You might break it down into different increments, but eventually you should get 4 square root 13. That's what h, that's the height of the triangle. So now we're dealing with our right triangle that has 17, a height of 4 root 13, and a base of 18. So to figure out the area, that's half the base times the height. So we could do that. We could take half of 18. So that's going to become 36 square root 13. And our units are in feet. It's area, so it's feet squared. A shipping dock has a mobile ramp that is used to help load and unload cargo from the trucks. The ramp is 125 inches long and has a base that's 120 inches long. What is the height of the ramp? So we're trying to figure out h. Again, this is a right triangle. We already know two sides, so we can use Pythagorean theorem or even perhaps a Pythagorean triple to help us calculate this. That's 125. That's 120. And my height is going to be the shortest. So what I recognize right now is that 5 goes into all of these. So I'm getting the number 25, getting the number 24, and my unknown value. Well, if I look at my Pythagorean triples, I see 7, 24, and 25 is a Pythagorean triple. So I'm going to take that 7, multiply it by what I was dividing by, and I know my missing side is going to be 36. So we say, 35 inches. So I used a Pythagorean triple to help me solve for that. You might use a Pythagorean theorem. You would get the same result. We're going to find the area of the triangle. We're going to round our answers to the nearest hundredth. So we remember that the area is base times height, so I don't know this side. I don't recognize this as being a Pythagorean triple. So I'm going to say across from the 90 is the hypotenuse. The other two sides are the legs. So we have 10 squared equals 5 squared plus x squared. 100 equals 25 plus x squared. By subtracting that across, we get 75 equals x squared. We can take the square root of 75, which is 25 times 3, which is 5 square root 3. That's what the height is. I'm sorry, that's what this base is. So now to calculate the area, it's the base times the height. So this is going to come out to be half of 25 root 3 divided by 2. So I know that we're going to take half. Using our calculator, we come up with 43.30, and dividing that in half, we get an area of 21.65, and that would be units squared. On this next triangle, if we're finding the area of the triangle, we need to know the base and the height. Well, right now I don't know what the height is. The height clearly is not 55. The height has to be perpendicular to the base. So I have to use this right triangle. Remember, we've learned that if a point is equal distance to the endpoints of a segment, then it has to be on the perpendicular bisector. So I know that this has to be 44, and this would be 44. It hits it right at the midpoint. So my hypotenuse is 55. Well, I just recognized something. If we use our unknown, our 44, and our 55, what number goes into 44 and 55? We're going to get 4 and we're going to get 5. So what's the Pythagorean triple that deals with something 4, 5? Well, of course, that is 3, 4, 5. So we're going to take our 3, multiply that by 11 to get 33. So I now know my height is 33. So to calculate the area, the base is 88, the height is 33. I can take half of either one of those. I can multiply those together and then take half of it. But I'm going to take half of the 88. And then I'll multiply those together, and I get an area of 1,452. Looks like the units are yards, and it's of course squared. Here we have a rectangle with QR of 8 and SQ of 10. What is the value of Y? Well, if this is a rectangle, then I know opposite sides are congruent. So now I have this right triangle. It's a rectangle, so I know we have a 90-degree angle. There's your hypotenuse. These are the legs. We're trying to find the value of Y. Well, I'm going to look at this as a Pythagorean triple. You can use Pythagorean theorem just fine. What number goes into 8 and 10? I get the numbers 4 and 5. So of course, hopefully you're beginning to recognize that 3, 4, 5 Pythagorean triple. So because 3 was our missing side, and we're going to multiply that by 2 to get it twice as big. So that has to be 6.